everyone. I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. You'll recognize the names: John F. Kennedy Jr., Stephen King, Michelle Dockery, Paul Newman, Giancarlo Esposito, Andy Warhol. Those individuals are all connected by Brownie Harris. Brownie has worked behind the camera for more than 40 years, capturing moments in time and famous faces around the world. He's also worked to keep America's military families connected when deployments and service have pulled them apart. And yes, Brownie is his real first name.
No, that's my real name. It came from my uncle. My uncle was named Brownie. So there was a midwife, and my aunt didn't know how to name the child, so the midwife said, well, he looks like a little brownie.
Oh, really?
So that where he got his name, and I just, my family gave me his name, but they didn't know I was going to be a photographer. And a lot of people under 30 probably don't know what a Brownie camera was.
Right. But your parents, your dad and your uncle were both in photography, correct?
Right. That's probably how I started, because both my father and uncle took photographs all the time. My father took, Kodachrome film.
And then we're not talking about the Paul Simon song here. We're talking about actual Kodachrome.
Right. Actual Kodachrome.
Yeah.
And my uncle would take black and white photographs. So I watched them, and I borrowed my father's camera when I was like 13.
Oh, wow.
And took photographs of my rabbit or something.
And those are the first ones you ever took?
Right, of a rabbit. And I think a portrait of my mother.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You still have it?
I would love to find it. I don't know. My brother has all the transparencies that my father took from the 50s until up until the 90s, so he might find it in there.
Yeah. Now, you didn't decide to be a photographer, though, from what I understand and some of the research I did. It was a train ride that really kind of sparked your interest in wanting to do this as a career. Is that right? Right.
My roommate, when I was at art school at VCU in Richmond, Virginia Commonwealth University, he lived in Beaufort, South Carolina, and one night we were in a sort of a shady neighborhood, and on a black and white TV, they said that Martin Luther King was assassinated. We were buying a case of beer or a six-pack, whatever it was back then. But we were underage. But
right. Yeah. Well, as the story goes.
I know. So the next night, we took a train ride from Yemassee, South Carolina, back to Richmond, and every town was on fire. And a friend of mine had a Nikon F camera, and he let me borrow it. And back then, you could walk between the trains, and they were open, and we would take photographs. So that night I decided to become a photographer.
And what was it? It was just the capturing the images or not wanting to forget. What was it that drove you to want to take these images of time for the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that before. You'd see towns on fire and, people looting and, National Guard there, and Rocky Mountain, North Carolina, all the way up to Richmond.
Something you never forget, even though you have it. It burned on your mind.
Right.
You graduated from VCU. What was your thought? Did you have plans? I know you went to New York City after that, but what was your plan as you were going through the rest of your life, or going through the rest of your college career there? Then?
Well, I went there originally to the School of Arts to be a painter, and I kept making paintings that looked like photographs, and I thought, why am I doing this? So I graduated in communication arts and design, graphic design, but I always had a love for photography and shot a lot of photographs back then too.
And growing up with the images and with the cameras that you had, just something that you thought was going to be your life pursuit, so you picked up and moved to New York City?
Well, no, I took a little detour to North Africa, to Morocco, with two friends of mine in New York, and one was she needed some protection because she was buying fabric for Betsy Johnson, and I didn't know who Betsy Johnson was at the time.
Okay.
Who was a famous clothing designer, fashion designer now.
Mm-hmm.
So we were there, and then I was in Switzerland for almost a year, picking grapes and apples and delivering wine, and then I came back to the United States, and I was an art director in Roanoke, Virginia for about 6 months, and I left Roanoke with $200 and went to New York City, and I was a taxi cab driver for a couple months.
Right.
And painted Lost in Tribeca when no one knew what Tribeca was.
Right, yeah.
And I was a photo assistant for a couple months, and I thought, I don't want to do this photo assisting thing. So a friend of mine was at WNET, Channel 13, PBS,
the PBS,
in New York City.
yeah.
Yes, the mother station of public broadcasting in the United States. So I started there as a graphic designer for 6 months freelancing. then I realized they needed photography within the corporation, so I created a photography department there when I was 23 years old. So I was Dick Cavett photographer, and Bill Moyer's photographer for 7 years, and did Dance in America and Great Performances, and that's how I started.
Mm-hmm. And some of the earlier, I mean, when you took these images, as a photographer, what did you do? Do you just take images? Were they promo shots? What
They were
kind
for
of work
advertising and promotion.
Okay. So would you have the say on the best ones?
Well, you'd throw away the bad ones. But back then it was film, so if you had a contact sheet, it was pretty hard to get rid of it. But,
right.
You know.
And
there were some editors that knew what they were looking at.
Mm-hmm. So Dick Cavett, Bill Moyer, stories of those times?
Charlie Rose was Bill Moyer's producer back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, great guy.
And just learning, I mean, talking about the people you're learning from, the Cavetts and the Moyers, I mean, they're culture icons at that time, right?
Yes.
And I can imagine the discussions that were going on and the people that came through the studios. What are your fondest memories?
Probably a private meeting with Sophia Loren at her private suite at the Pierre Hotel in New York City with Dick Cavett, where he had Slidini there, who was a famous Italian magician card player. Sophia Loren and Dick Cavett loved playing cards and magic tricks.
Really?
So we were there for like 3 hours. He said you could bring your camera or not. And I thought, well, why would I bring my camera? The lighting's probably going to be terrible. Well, I'm glad I brought my camera.
Sure.
And we sat there and they played cards and did magic tricks for 3 hours and drank bourbon and smoked Dunhill cigarettes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And when did you decide at that point in time that you were going to go out on your own? Were you freelancing as you were starting to get more of those things after you left Cavett?
There weren't a lot of television photographers back then, still photographers. So I was freelancing also for ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started after I left television because I thought I was taking the same photograph over and over.
What do you mean?
Well, it wasn't always a situation that you were lighting and you were setting up.
Okay,
someone else was doing that. So I decided I wanted to do corporate annual reports, big industrial shoots. So I started shooting for Exxon annual report within weeks of leaving public television. And I did GE's annual report and Raytheon annual report for 15 years.
What drew you to that? I mean, here you are in New York City, and you're in a room with Dick Cavett and Sophia Loren, and then all of a sudden you want to take pictures of machines.
Right.
That sounds like not a fork in the road, but you're doing it. You're doing a U-turn here.
It was. I probably got it from my father. He was a research and development engineer. Two other men designed the rocket propellant motor for the Polaris missile and a bunch of other Atlas missile and Minuteman back in the 60s. Because growing up where I grew up was like madmen, but engineers,
Really?
So I think I all of a sudden I got an interest in doing industrial photography because I think that you were sent to a place you had never been before, and you were supposed to come back with something that looked like a jewel, so you had total control. So I'd be flown from New York to Greenville, South Carolina, and photograph the largest gas turbine in the world, or a large spacecraft that GE Astro was doing at the time, or a Doppler weather radar for Raytheon, or the Patriot missile. I mean, all kinds of things. We would fly all over the world.
Favorite stories? Biggest challenge?
I think probably, lighting a gas turbine that would took like 6 or 8 hours to light, which is a huge.
No, that's the one with the gentleman crawling on the top of the turbine.
Yeah, just for scale. Otherwise, it looks like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
It's about 6 inches long, but it's quite large. But I think the biggest challenge was photographing John F. Kennedy Jr.
Well, I understand. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But there's one thing about photographing a human being.
Right.
You can see the eyebrows. You can see the emotion, even in the eyes. Mm-hmm. But what do you do to make a gas turbine look like a jewel? I mean, because I again, looking at some of the pictures and doing some of the research, is it lighting? I mean, the color is so brilliant. There's got to be a key to how you've succeeded in doing that for 15 years, or how you did anyway.
Well, because you have an eye, you have a background in graphic design first, and then you want to create a scale, and the lighting certainly helps because a lot of these places are not that clean.
Right.
I mean, it might look like the inside of a steel mill or something. But, a spacecraft, might be just in the fluorescent lighting, which is not really great lighting. So, you like that spacecraft. I mean, we use 27 strobes that go off at once.
Right. So you're creating just a massive amount of light and then trying to get the best time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go into some of the other stuff, you mentioned growing up. Talk to me about Brownie growing up. What were you like as a young kid?
Oh, I was very shy.
Really?
Oh, yes. Probably until my late 20s.
Well, where did you grow up?
Well, we grew up in Virginia. We're from Whitfield, Virginia for the first 5 years. And then my father had a car dealership with my uncle, and they stopped that, and they moved. My father and family moved to Cumberland, Maryland, which is way at the end of nowhere, the western part of Maryland.
Right.
Great place to be brought up.
Right.
So I was there until I was 18.
And
it was like that movie Stand By Me. That's what it was like growing up.
Really?
Exactly like that. Yes. Walking down with your friends on a railroad track and, just having fun, making huts.
It's a different time.
Yes, the 60s.
I mean, it was a different time that parents didn't have to worry about their children. They can let them roam and let them walk down the railroad track and then just give a yell and they'd come back for dinner.
Right. You left in the morning, you came back at night, and no one asked anything.
Were you a studious child? Were you an athlete? What did you do?
Oh, I was terrible as an athlete. Both my brothers were all-American football players, and I was the guy in the corner, like in Wedding Crashers, but not gay, painting in the corner,
Really?
That was me, yeah.
And you have two brothers?
Yes.
And what do they do?
One had comprehensive home health care here in Wilmington for quite some time, and he's retired now. And I have another brother in Kentucky. He's more of an IT guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you a get together with the brothers all the time kind of guy?
Not quite, because we're all busy.
We're
all busy, and I have taking care of two teenage daughters.
Yeah. But I mean, I know that's how you came to Wilmington, because your brother,
Right, he said to come down here for 2 days,
and that was how many
22 years ago. Right.
So it's been a long weekend, right?
Yeah, it has been a very long weekend. Is it over yet?
How did you get started with some of the celebrity photographs and stuff? Was that more of a freelance kind of thing too?
Yes, I mean, a lot of those photographs were after I was in television, like the private portrait session of like Andy Warhol. We could talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to.
And Miles Davis and Carly Simon. It was the second for the Andy Warhol photograph. It was the second week of USA Today, and I photographed him at the factory, the studio in Union Square in New York City, and he didn't. He's sort of upset because he didn't say a word. I was
going to say, I read, and I read somewhere where you said he didn't talk to you.
He didn't say a word. So it sort of upset me a little bit.
I can understand.
And I made him turn the chair around so like he's in his own prison.
His reaction?
Nothing. So what I thought was really cool about the photograph, it was, like I said, it was the second week of USA Today, and they said they were going to scan the photograph. This was 1982. We did not know what scanning was back then. We didn't know what scanning was, I think, until, the late 90s or something, 97. They were going to scan the photograph in New York City, make it in zeros and ones, and send it to a satellite, and then to their printer in Missouri. That was the first time a newspaper ever did that.
Right.
When USA started. I'm trying to remember who started USA Today. He was a vanguard in that process.
The name escapes me again.
Yeah. Not Gannett. I forget his name. But
anyway,
Gannett. Yes.
Gannett.
And that was sort of brilliant. And I thought, how are they going to send my photograph to a satellite and then to a printer? I mean, it's bizarre in zeros and ones. Now it's so common. And let's see, the other photograph I think probably was the John F. Kennedy Jr. portrait session.
Sure. There's a picture of yours at King Kong.
Yes.
Black and white.
Yes.
And this was, I guess, in the late 70s.
76 for Time Magazine.
Time Magazine.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, because, now if somebody tried to do that now, that would be all CGI. You know what I mean? That would be done somewhere in somebody's office.
On a blue screen.
On a blue screen.
Or a green screen, yeah.
But you were there with thousands of people and a fake, huge ape laying on the ground, right? Talk to me about this.
And the real World Trade Centers. Dino De Laurentiis, the connection with Wilmington, he was the producer and the director. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Time Magazine wanted a photograph, so I went down there. I'm on a truck, and I had this 20 millimeter lens, and I thought, why did I bring this lens? And I took one frame where I turned it around where you see 3,000 people, the same amount of people that were killed at 9/11, and then the huge King Kong at the bottom, and you see the World Trade Centers going up at night into the sky, and I call it fallen giants now.
You actually took the lens off and turned it around?
No, I put a 20 millimeter lens. I had a zoom lens on because it was going to be a small photograph in time, so it couldn't be something very wide. So I used a 20 millimeter lens, and on this particular shot that you saw,
right?
And I put the camera vertically so you could see the World Trade Centers all the way to the top.
As you're starting to build your notoriety in New York City with a picture like that and some of the other things, how does a name start to get circulated in New York City? How did that all start to begin?
Well, back then it was a lot easier. You could just show up with your portfolio and meet somebody, or they would see your work. And I was shooting for Business Week and Fortune and Forbes. They would see your name. They would see annual report people would see your industrial stuff. You would double park, in front of these advertising agencies and rush in and put your mailers in the mailroom, and they would deliver them to the people. I mean, it wasn't like or you'd pick up you go to a pay booth and pick up the pay booth and pay telephone and call an art director, and he'd see you in 5 minutes. It's not that way anymore.
So from the King Kong, you're still in New York City. You're still doing freelance
work. Still in
work.
public television at the time. Yes.
Yeah, still doing all that kind of stuff. When did you get into some of the studio shoots?
Well, I think probably more in the early 80s, mid 80s. I mean, the photograph of Miles Davis.
That's the one I was going to talk about.
Right,
yeah.
84, Carly Simon 85, Kennedy 88.
And they were done in a studio that you had?
No. Miles Davis was done in a hotel in Washington, D.C. Carly Simon was shot at her apartment in New York City, and John F. Kennedy Jr. was shot at the recording studio. He was doing the voiceover for his father's book.
His father's book.
Yeah.
So who contracted you? Was that a contracted date? Did they contract you? How did those stories go?
Right. Like Miles Davis, it was Marie Claire magazine in France.
Oh, okay.
And John F. Kennedy Jr. Raytheon owned Cadnam Records at the time, and they did audio tapes. So he was doing the voiceovers for Profiles in Courage. So it was just a small photograph for the audio tape. But now it's iconic. I mean, it was last August's cover of People magazine.
Yeah.
The largest portrait ever published on People.
Yeah.
They even forgo their logo for his hair.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure they got all that in there.
Yeah, right.
The Miles Davis picture. It took a while to get him to sit down, from what I understand, right? Talk to me about that story, because he didn't want to sit down immediately, right?
Yes, it was at a hotel room in New York City, and flew in from New York, and he had, I didn't realize later, he had the White House limousine because he was honored at the White House the night before, and they had breakfast with Reagan that next morning, and he was married to Cicely Tyson at the time, and she was with him, and she was wonderful. And he didn't talk much. He didn't want to be photographed. He wanted to go downtown to buy a pair of shoes, so we went in D.C., so we went downtown and stood by the limousine while they went off for 45 minutes, and then they took us to the Palm Room. We got really drunk and ate a lot, and finally took the photograph at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
So when you're dealing with the celebrities, do you have to kind of play to their wants and desires, and when they're ready, they're ready? What do you as a photographer do in that instance?
Right. Well, first of all, you go in there, you don't make yourself more important than them. Back then you didn't have all these publicity, PR people that were standing around controlling what you were doing. Hey, you're with Miles Davis. I mean, one of the greatest jazz musicians. You just, hey, however long it's going to last, it's going to last. I mean, not everybody can meet him, or John Kennedy, or Sophia Loren, or Carly Simon, or Paul Newman.
And Paul Newman. That's another one that I have down here. Why black and white for the Miles Davis shot, as opposed to color? Was it just the stark difference in, because if you look, and you've said before that there's two sides to the man's face in that picture. And is it because the black and white brings that out a little bit more? But why was that a black and white picture?
I shot both black and white and color.
Right.
I just thought it brought out the two parts of his life. He died of heroin overdose a few years later. Right. I mean, if you go like that and then go like that, you see two different people.
Right. And And so, do you like black and white better?
Sometimes it just depends.
Depends on the instance.
You never know.
Um,
Now it's so easy to change from color to black and white digitally.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot it black color and then change it.
Andy Warhol didn't say a word.
Didn't say a word.
That. Were you surprised? Were you scared? Were you?
I was a little scared, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Andy Warhol, at the factory in New York City in Union Square. I mean, it was like the ultimate, to meet an icon like that.
And so when you said, "Okay, we've got it," he just picks up and walks out.
I said, "We're finished. Bye. I'll see you later," or something. Whatever. I should have photographed him on he had his Great Dane was stuffed on wheels. I should have put him on that instead.
Wow.
It was dead.
Paul Newman.
Yes.
Why a racing uniform?
Okay. I was hired by Allied Signal. They were coming up with a new prototype for a fuel injection, and they wanted to try it out in his Nissan with the Bob Sharp racing team in Lime Rock, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, go there and photograph him, testing that car out. And within 5 minutes of seeing him, he said, "Brownie, what if you get an A in photography and fail life?" I was wondering for 30 years what that meant. And I think, might be wrong, but I did a little bit of research. I think a few weeks before that, his son had died.
Okay.
So what he was thinking is make your family more important than your career. I thought he was talking about me.
Right.
But I think he was talking about himself.
Conversations with him. I mean, obviously that he says that, but I mean, any other conversation?
That was the first thing that came out of his mouth, and that was
really? Not even happy to meet you or anything like that?
Well, we shook hands, and I told him what my name was. Obviously, I knew who he was.
Right.
But then he asked us to drive around the track to dry it, and that was the first time. That night, I checked the rental car agreement. It says you're not insured if you're on a racetrack.
Uh-oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, we went around the track to dry it for him.
That picture, if I look at it,
Mm-hmm.
the eyes.
Yes.
The blue in the eyes.
Yes.
Is that what you
Piercing.
noticed immediately?
Yes.
So how do you work to bring that out?
You don't have to. He just has to show up.
Amazing. And the JFK Jr. shoot.
Mm-hmm.
This was one in 1988. He was doing the audio tape. Were you in any way trying to make him more comfortable? Because from what everybody says, he wasn't comfortable really yet in what he was supposed to be.
Yes, that was, I think, that month or the next month. It was the time the speech he did at the Democratic Convention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really the first time the public really saw him speaking. He came there on a bicycle without any Secret Service agents, and he walked up, and I'm waiting in the lobby of this recording studio, and he comes up and shakes my hand and says, "I'm John F. Kennedy Jr." And I thought, yes, I know. I mean, I didn't
Really?
say that, but anyway.
Sure.
You just liked him instantly. And
Really?
we photographed him in a room, I swear, John, it was probably only about twice or three times the size of this room.
Mm-hmm.
We just had a small gray background and one light. And he it was the first private studio portrait since his father was in the White House. He said to me, "I don't know what to do," because he'd never really sat down. I mean, there would have been paparazzi and
Sure.
family photographs like that.
Yeah.
And so I said, "You don't have to do anything. I mean, it's not as hard as going to the dentist or something," I said. And he started laughing. And that's where I got that laughing photograph. You didn't see a lot of photographs of him laughing.
Right.
But all of a sudden that photograph, I mean, after 11 years after he died, it became iconic because the JFK Museum in Hyannis hired a painter to do the portrait. This was a couple months after he died in 99. Which was 18 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
hard to believe.
Crazy. And they looked at 6,000 photographs worldwide, and they chose my photographs to base the painting on. So I was invited up there for the unveiling of the painting. This was in September that same year, and the painting and my photographs would be hanging on the wall. We get up there, and it's Hyannis, and it's all fogged in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and my friend, the painter, and his husband, I thought, this was the dumbest idea. No one's going to come here today. Of course, 3,500
Sure.
people showed up.
Yeah.
But then it became, all since then, more of an iconic photograph of him. I liked him instantly. I was playing like music for the 1960s, while we were shooting. It only lasted like 20 minutes or something.
Now, the story goes he started without the jacket on, and
Which
you
he
told
looked like a kid at 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But once he put the jacket on, something happened that I didn't realize this until 11 years later when I compared the photograph at first when he went in there and then the one we finished with. It's almost like that he became the person, the age of closer to his death.
Yeah.
That he became this mature person. I was shocked. I mean, if you compare them.
Yeah. And after I heard you say that once, I actually did kind of look at both of them, and that was amazing.
Yes.
Just the change in
the transformation.
Yeah, the transformation. Why do you think that the black? I know the color one has been used, and it was on the front part of the book and everything. But why do you think the black and white one is so much more iconic?
I think you see that he, really. He didn't shave. He had like a little stubble, and he had his fingernails. You see more that he bites his fingernails, and he had a cut on his finger. It's more like a real person instead of this iconic person.
Any celebrity that you interviewed that you photographed that turned out to be somebody completely different than you would have imagined or that you had imagined before?
Yes. The funniest, most intelligent man I ever photographed was David Brinkley. And I never expected him to be so funny. The funniest person I've ever met in my life.
Really?
Yes. I took the last professional photographs of him before he died. It was 3 years before he died.
And that was in Colorado?
It was in Spring Gulch, Wyoming.
Wyoming.
It's between Wilson and Jackson Hole.
Okay.
And at first I thought he was not going to like me at all, And then we just started talking and joking and, we started laughing a lot. And he loved photography. And 3 weeks after he died, I got 3 huge boxes of his cameras.
Really?
Yes. Let's see, a Rolly system from 1953 or 51, Nikon system from 71, and a Canon system from the late 70s. I mean, they were 3 boxes like this big.
Yeah.
That he willed to me. Oh, he was a great guy. I love that guy.
What made him so funny?
I don't know. I guess, he's been all over the world and, seen everything. But, I mean, he was hilarious. I mean, I was there 3 days, and we were invited to dinner at his house a couple times, and he would sit at the end, and I'd sit at the end, and he would just, he controlled everything. I mean, it was hilarious.
And you being in Wilmington at that point in time, obviously you had a tie to him,
yes,
correct?
Right. And through Elizabeth Wright was the connection. And every time, those years that he would come back here, we would get together.
And that's because the picture that, at least that I've seen, has him, what is it, on a back porch? Where did you shoot him? Back porch
where you see sort of the plains of Spring Gulch. It's almost like if that tree wasn't there to the right, you would see the Grand Tetons.
And you put him out there?
Like Mount Rushmore.
Is that what you were looking at?
I was thinking of. And I said, "You look like Kennedy." He turned around and said, "You look like Kennedy at the window at the White House."
Yeah.
Oh, he loved those photographs.
Yeah. Any celebrity that you really just did not like after your session?
No, I just went to the next assignment. It didn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stories I can't tell you on air.
I understand. I understand.
There are a couple. There's only one, but I'll tell you later.
Hearts Apart.
Yes.
2010. Tell me the genesis of this.
That long ago?
Yes, 2010.
Gosh.
Tell me the genesis, because this is for families of service members, and something that, when it all began, I really thought was a tremendous service to these young men and women.
Well, I didn't realize it was that long ago we started. But anyway, Brett Martin, who's the founder and CEO of Castle Branch, and I co-founded heartsapart.org. And it's a nonprofit organization that we take photographs about to be about to be deployed service members and their families for free at no cost. And we make a bifold weatherproof card that's indestructible. It's almost like the fabric. It's almost like this fabric. It's outdoor fabric, that you can print on. And it's a bifold card that they can put in their pocket while they're deployed. Well, I did it for the first 6 months alone. And 2 months into it, there was a live interview out of New York, Fox News.
Yeah.
They got this one right. This thing just blew up worldwide.
Right.
And then 4 or 5 months later, we were honored at the White House. We were chosen one of 20 nonprofits in the United States out of 300 or 350 to be honored at the White House. It was a program that the White House had. It was called White House Family Military Initiative. Mm-hmm. And we were honored at the White House that April. But, I did it alone for 6 months, and it was overpowering my life. We had a couple of people around the United States at that time, but now I have 10 in Wilmington. We have 450 photographers around the United States right now.
Wow.
That is huge, huge. And it's never ending. It'll never end.
When is the first time you realized how important it was to these families?
Well, I think it was the second couple that came in, and her name was Christina. And she was walking out of the studio, and tears were just pouring down her face. She says, "This is the most wonderful thing we've ever experienced in our life. This is so wonderful. We didn't think anybody in this country cared." And of course, everybody else in the studio, everybody was crying at that point.
Sure.
So then I think we realized the importance of it at that point.
And any time were you ever overcome by emotion as you're doing this?
Yes. One time there was we have another program where we take photographs of babies that the father has not, he's seen it in Skype or family photographs, but not really professional photography.
Right.
So I was shooting one baby, and the mother was sitting by the couch Skyping her husband in Afghanistan. So I saw that, and I walked over there, and I turned the camera around, the live view, for the husband to see these great photographs that we just took of his son. And the tears were just coming down from him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that powerful.
And
I was tearing up too,
Yeah. Is it something that you get? Is there a special military story in your background, or what drew you to this? Just the service and giving back to these young men and women?
Right. I think when Brett and I first met, we said, how can we give back? And then we were just, we both love photography, and this is how that started.
Why do you have a pool table in your studio?
I mean, at his studio.
Well,
the Hearts Apart studio.
Yeah, the Hearts Apart studio. Why is there a pool table there?
I don't know.
Do you need time in between session shoots sometimes?
You mean play pool, you mean?
Yeah, play pool, step outside. Do you need to recharge after some, in a session?
I was really
sometime?
not a studio photographer, so I need to leave quickly.
Do you?
Yes.
Why?
I like location photography better.
And is that what you like about the TV productions here in town that you've done between Under the Dome and all the other
Revolution, Secret and Lies, Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
God, it was. Yeah, I think the TV part I like because of the camaraderie, of all the people, mm-hmm. and how all these elements fit together to create this one final piece that's remarkable. And you have the best crews in the world here.
Yeah, and
truly,
you've become a friend to Stephen King.
Well, he has my photographs on his wall in his house in Florida, and he wants another one I have to ship to him.
Now, he came here obviously for Under the Dome.
Yeah, that's when I first met him.
And what was it like getting to know this man that literally scares the daylights out of people on a regular basis?
He's just not like that in real life, not at all. He's like a regular person, You would meet on the street. I mean, it's bizarre. And
you told me earlier the story about you were in. Didn't you just do another shoot for him on another series?
Yeah, Mr. Mercedes in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a Stephen King TV series.
And he told you the story about how he came up with the concept?
Yes.
Can you share that?
Yes. He said that he was driving from Maine to Florida, and that he stayed in this, I think he said, inexpensive motel. He probably did, so he wouldn't be noticed. And he was laying there, and on TV there was Columbine shooting or some shooting, a mass killing or something. And he came up with this idea about Mr. Mercedes, which is a guy, this crazy guy who steals a Mercedes and runs over a lot of people in a stadium, I think.
That's just it.
Yes.
How that stuff comes.
He just comes up with this stuff. He probably wrote it in one day. I have no idea.
Yeah. What about Sleepy Hollow? You developed a pretty good friendship with one of the stars on Sleepy Hollow, right? Tom Eisen?
Tom Eisen, yes.
How did that develop?
Well, I first met him on a pilot that we shot in north of Charlotte, and he came up to me and he said, "You know, when I was in theatrical school, university in London, the professor said, Tom, you need to treat the still photographer like gold, because the first thing that people see in public is that still photograph. They don't see a video or a trailer first. They see that still photograph. So you need to take care of that guy or that woman."
Right.
And so we became instant friends. You know, he was great. He knew exactly, like if I didn't get it, if something was in the way or something, he knew exactly, and he would just recreate it like in a second, and we would go away with it.
To get the shot you needed?
Yes. I mean, he had a sense of that. You know, he knew how important still photography was.
Revolution was a challenge.
That wasn't it?
Yes.
It was 116 degrees one day in Curry. We were up there.
What was it like for you?
Well, that was the first time I started shooting TV and film again since I was in public television. And, NBC had called me, and I thought, why would I go back to doing what I did when I started my career? But then, business had changed, digital had come in, and everybody's a photographer. I mean, even with an iPhone, or they think they are, right?
Right, yes.
And which is a great process, but I just thought, since business had gone down, that I would start shooting for NBC and see how it went. I loved it. I mean, Giancarlo Esposito. I mean, he was great.
Yes, and you still do it now with the TNT's Good Behavior. You're having some fun with that now, and working with that casting crew.
Yes.
What are they like?
Oh, the cast is just unbelievable. Michelle Dockery is a great actress. I mean, very few actresses or actor you see tell the story with her eyes. If she's not speaking, you can tell the story just by looking at her eyes. She's brilliant. I love working with her, and the crew is great. I mean, it's the best crew in the world.
What's your secret to getting those kind of shots? Because obviously you have to be around, and you have to go around a camera, and you have to work around. So what is your secret? I mean, I don't want you to give away any trade secrets, but what do you do to try to get the best kind of shot?
Well, you try, first of all, like you said, you try not to get in the way, and you try to be humble and be a fly on the wall, and try not to get in their sight line. They don't like that. And a lot of times you can get, good shots not shooting from what their camera is shooting from. And like the other day, they had a track that was maybe 40 feet long up against a wall. And how do you get behind that, Right. There's a lot of obstacles. I mean, people, they see these photographs, but there's like 100 different things going on around, and you just have to be not noticeable.
Yeah, blend in.
Blend in a lot. And don't, not talk much.
Can you look at a picture without judging the person who took it?
What do you mean?
Can you look at, say, a landscape picture and say, "Oh, I would have done this way"? Or can you enjoy?
Every photographer say that.
but the point is, even if I'm on vacation and I go to wherever it is,
right.
I'll turn on the news and I'll sit there and say, "Oh, I might have led with this story instead."
Very good, yeah.
So can you do something like that? Can you look at a picture and admire the work, or do you say, or would you judge in how you
admire the work? I mean, good for you, that you captured that, It's a lot easier now to capture images because you can see it right away.
But you're not necessarily judging people immediately by what you see.
There's so many people that are better than me. I mean,
What's been the key to your success?
like I said before, not making yourself more important than the subject, and I think you have to have an eye. I mean, the camera doesn't matter. Just moving forward, one assignment after the next, because you're always unemployed, until the next job. If you're freelance, no matter how successful you are.
So is it a more glorified lifestyle that people make it out to be?
Sure is, especially in film and TV. It's hard work. I mean, these kids work really hard. I mean, there was a guy on Revolution that handled the weapons, and he was a gunner in Vietnam in a helicopter. He said, Brownie, I've never seen a group of people that were this cohesive and worked so well together, as a unit. He could only compare it to the American military.
Was there ever a time, even after you started, after WNET or in New York, or was there ever a time you thought about, I'm done, I've got to do something else, this is not for me?
Never thought of that. I mean, I will always do this. That never came into my mind.
January of 2015, at Cape Fear Community College, the Wilma Daniels Gallery, there was a retrospective of Brownie Harris's work. 45 years worth of Brownie Harris's work.
Yes.
What was that like? You have a retrospective in your home, because I've been in your home and I've seen everything that you have there. But what was it like to have like a retrospective in a gallery and hanging there with people really looking at all your work over 45 years?
It was amazing. I didn't realize it until we put it together. I think there were 90-some pieces, and some were 6 feet tall. And it was overwhelming. I'd sort of forgotten a lot of stories, and some of the photographs I did add stories. So I've been writing what it was like to, be with Sophia Loren or whoever, or Warhol, and write stories about it. It was overwhelming because I didn't realize once I found things, that I had done that much.
But it was, as people look, because a lot of your work has been in magazines. A lot of your work has been where people
Yes.
can share it in a personal space. This is you walking in and seeing people's reaction. So that had to be different for you.
Yes. It was overwhelming. I mean, people just, loved it. You can see, I have 11 pieces hanging now at Grand Cru. It's in Lumina Station. It's a restaurant, a wine bar.
Right.
There's 11, Warhol's in there, and Kennedy, and Miles Davis, and Paul Newman.
But to see people's reaction to your work has to be. I mean, when I don't get a chance to see that very often because
Right.
I'm live most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't see what people are seeing on the other side. And I imagine it was the same for you, actually seeing people's reaction to some of the pieces that maybe they hadn't seen in a long time.
I mean, I had tears in my eyes at one point, because people were so overwhelmed. A lot of people said, Brad, I didn't realize you had done all these things. And I said, I didn't either until I put it together. Really, I kept finding, images that had already been printed that I forgot about, that were, boxed up.
Bring back any special memories? Or are there too many to mention?
There's too many to mention. I'd have to think about that.
Any time when you were scared on the job?
Yes.
Felt your safety? Felt you weren't safe?
The Hanford nuclear weapon factory in, was it eastern part of the state of Washington.
What was that?
So GE. That's
just
where
because of...
Well, that's where they were, disposing of the waste. It was for a shoot for GE.
Didn't know what to expect?
Right. Is it in the water? Which later they found out it was.
Right.
You were taking a shower in some cheap motel and you go, is it in the water? They found out it was.
It to me, it capturing images forever is a pretty daunting thing.
How do you know it's forever?
Well, because I think it now can be kept in forever.
Yeah, but people take photographs, all the time and put it on this, and they never see them. They never print them out. So where are their memories?
How do you go about creating those memories?
Print them out.
There has to be a secret to you, but you said try not to make everything bigger than you are, right?
Right. Yes.
Do you have a favorite camera?
The one I'm using now, you mean?
At any time.
I love the Nikon D800, which I'm using now, which is ultimate. You could not take a lot of these photographs in what we're shooting with film because they're using so little light now. I mean, sometimes they're using like little lights to light people, you know. And years ago, it was like lit all over the place. So you can push the ISO or ASA, the film speed, you know, up to, you know, 7,500 or 50,000, you know, and you can take photographs handheld in low situations that you could never, ever do with film. So,
Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yes. That's why I was writing some of the stories someday. It's tough to sell a photography book nowadays.
But it won't be tough to sell the stories that you've had.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
I'll bring you back once the book is written.
Okay,
right?
okay.
But it to me it has to have been just an exciting time from start to finish for you,
Yes.
doing everything it's been.
Yes, I'll never stop. I have to continue doing it.
Who knows what Brownie Harris's next assignment will be? Good Behavior, the TNT show, is now still shooting in and around Wilmington, so we'll likely see more of his photographs from the set. If you'd like to check out his gallery, go to brownieharris.com. And Hearts Apart is still going strong all across the country. If you'd like to support that effort, it's heartsapart.org. If you know someone who you think would be a good interview for an upcoming episode of the podcast, drop me an email at jevans@wect.com. Or you can reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter. I'm on those social media sites every day. And if you like what you heard in this episode of the podcast, please leave a review, because that will help us bring in even more listeners. I'm John Evans. Thanks for joining us for this episode of One on One.